Hello and welcome to True Performance. I'm your host, Chris Widener. True performance is the ideal accomplishment of an aspiration, goal, or objective that benefits everyone involved. Here with me today is the founder and creator of True Performance, Zig Ziglar. Zig, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Chris.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. Hey, we're going to talk about something that I think you know a thing or two about. We're going to talk about sales today. Is that all right with you?
Well, it pleases me because everybody's involved in sales.
No, okay, so I've heard that said before. Everything in life is sales. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that when a baby first gets here, they're in sales. You know, when they whine and cry, you know, everybody goes running to them, you know. So they get started that way, and then as they get a little older, they become a little manipulative about it, but they are salespeople. America was discovered by salesmen. By no stretch of imagination could you accuse Christopher Columbus of being, you know, a navigator. You know, he was from Italy, and here he is coming over in this direction, and he had to sail all the way over. Had to sail to get the financing, had to sail to get the sailors to stay on board, the whole 9 yards. And, you know, they were afraid that the ship would go over the edge.
Sure.
Well, the truth of the matter is one of them did go over the edge. Well, anyhow, he sold the idea. But Sir Walter Raleigh is the one that populated America. He traveled around the coffee houses in London, persuading those people to get aboard and come into this new land where opportunity was even greater. Then we were freed by a salesman. George Washington was an incredible salesman to lead this nation into war against the most powerful nation in the world, largest army, largest navy, and here we are, just a little struggling bunch. And he had to sell them on that idea. He had to tell them in all honesty, now, I tell you fellas, if we win this war, we're not going to have any money to pay you, and if we lose you, if we lose, they're going to hang you to the highest tree. Now, that took a sales job.
Yeah, how do you sell that deal?
And then we were populated by salesmen, Lewis and Clark. You know, at the time of our independence, 200 years after we got here, the population had only moved to the Appalachian Mountains. Now, when Lewis and Clark came along, established those trading posts across the country, then in the next 20 years, we moved all the way to the West Coast. Yes, selling is everything.
You know, there's an old saying that says, those who can't teach, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that I love about your story is that you teach sales, but you've also cut your teeth all those years selling, and it started very young. And I thought you could tell us some of those stories of how you learned to sell even as a little boy.
Well, Dad had died. We still had 6 children at home. My mom did, and it was the heart of the Depression. We survived because we had 3 milk cows in a large garden, and that was more food than we could eat as a family and more milk than we could drink as a family. And so I sold on the streets of Yazoo City, Mississippi, those products. And then a little later, I graduated to selling peanuts downtown. I made a penny a bag for each 5-cent sale that I made. I had some wonderful experiences and wonderful times doing exactly that. It gave me a sense of independence at an early age because I could take that money and buy some of the things, and I generally bought clothes with it because, as I say, it was a struggle for the entire family. I've been in sales all my life.
Now, tell us the one story where you sold the peanuts because you had a goal in mind of what you wanted to spend the money on. You had your eye on a jacket, didn't you?
That's exactly right.
And that's an important lesson because sales can open up all the opportunity that we want. If we learn how to master it, do it well, set the goals, and we can go get some things. Tell us about that, getting your eye on that jacket as a young boy.
Well, that jacket cost 87 cents. Now, people will laugh today about that, but that was a whole bunch of money when I was a youngster. And I got a penny every time I sold a 5-cent bag of peanuts. And I never will forget when I had enough money and I stopped in the DeMitt Warren haberdashery store and bought that little jacket. My sister worked in a store close by there, and I was so proud of that jacket. They had wrapped it up for me. And so I took it to her, and she said, "Oh, short boy." That's what she called me. When
short boy. I've never heard that before.
Oh, I'm just so proud of you. Let me see that jacket. I said, "Oh, no, can't do that. I got to show it to my mama first." I would not let anybody see it until I got home, and I didn't unwrap it and put it on, and it was a cold October night. I remember that. And when I got home and showed it to my mama, I was just so proud of that, and she was so proud of me. I've been selling all of my life.
How old were you then?
I was probably about 9, maybe 10 years old.
Learning at an early age that it
Had
can
to be
provide
an
a great career for you.
Absolutely, it sure did.
Yeah. So when you got out of school, you started selling. You've sold door to door, and tell us about some of the jobs that you've held over the years selling, and what you've sold, and some of the lessons that you learned in selling over the years.
Well, I sold heavy-duty waterless cookware on the door-to-door demonstration plan, and that was a marvelous experience. It took me, the first 2.5 years, I struggled financially. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't sell a lot, because I did. I sold my furniture, sold my car. And that's fairly close to the truth. It really was. Then I went to a meeting, and a man named P.C. Merrill, who's an American Indian, persuaded me that I could be the #1 salesman in America out of the 7,000-member sales force. He said, "You've got everything that it takes to be a great salesman if you just believed in yourself and went to work on a regular schedule."
And this is in the cookware business.
That's
still.
right.
Okay.
And I put on the demonstration and door-to-door sales and so forth. I'd never had anybody say something like that to me. You could be a great one. You could be the national champion. Now, I've always been loved, but nobody ever thought of me as a champion. Because of Mr. Merrill's integrity, and because he had written the training program, and because he had set all of the records, I took him absolutely at his word. The previous year, I had not been in the top 5,000 out of that 7,000-member sales force. But the year after Mr. Merrill got through with me, I was #2 out of the 7,000. Had received the best promotion that that was available in the company at that time. And the interesting thing about the success that year, he did not really teach me that much about sales. I'd been in it 2.5 years at that point. But what he did teach me was about who I was. The picture I had of myself changed dramatically. I started thinking as a champion and performing as a champion. And I did finish #2 and had that wonderful promotion. His impact was great. In sales, and you know, I've written a book titled The Secrets of Closing the Sale. That was in 1984. And in those days, if you had a good book, they toured you, the publisher did. Today, you got to be a celebrity to get on that tour, because it does cost a whole lot of money for them to fly you around the country and do all of the signings and so forth. But I never will forget this particular thing. On the radio interviews I was having done and did, at least 90% of the first 25 of them would always start with the same thing. Zig, they tell me you could sell anything to anybody. I said, yeah, they lied to you when they said that, because you've just described a con artist. No legitimate professional salesperson would ever dream of selling anything that he did not fervently believe was in the best interest of the person he was selling to. Of all of the qualities that a good salesperson must have, #1 is integrity. Because if they don't have that, you see, we are trained as salespeople to persuade other people to buy, to make decisions. And an unethical salesperson can persuade people to buy things that they don't need, are overpriced, or they pressure them into buying it. A legitimate, integrity-driven salesperson will only sell a product that will enable him to sell them again and again and again. A product he would sell to his mother, in other words. That's the kind of salesperson who has long-term balanced success.
Well, and the problem with people who don't have integrity is they can sell for a while, but they can't create a career out of it. They can't sell for a long time, because the relationship, it seems like, is based on trust. The person who we sell to has to trust us.
Oh, absolutely. And if they don't trust you, they're not going to do business with you. And that trust, that's true in all of our relationships, wherever we are. Trust is the key. You know, a pleasing personality helps you win friends and influence people. But unless you build it on character, you will lose the friends and you will lose the influence. So selling is, because of its very nature, demanding that we have that high integrity. The Forum Corporation of Boston, which I referred to one one other time, did a study on several different industries in sales, and what they discovered was those with the highest degree of integrity sold the most. And the groups they interviewed and surveyed and studied, both groups were successful, but the one that was the most successful were those with the most integrity. They also had the best relationship skills. They understood that a sale is not complete until the order is signed, the product, goods, or services delivered, and the customer is satisfied with the transaction. Now, in order for all of that to happen, you need a team, because the person who fills that order back at the home office, the person who is the customer service individual, the one who makes certain everything is handled in a proper way, you're going to need the shipping department, you're going to need the executives in the company, you're going to need the people who are involved in that before the sale is complete. And for that reason, the salespeople with the most integrity and who built the greatest careers, when they called the home office, they were just as kind to the switchboard operator or the shipping clerk as they were the president of the company. So everybody was involved, and they were building a sale with those people who would help them consummate the sale to its degree, to the very best possible solutions and the best possible results.
Now, we did a whole show on integrity, but I want to drive down just a little bit more on integrity as it relates to sales. What does that mean for the guy out on the street selling to have integrity? Always be honest. What else does that mean? How does that apply itself?
It means that when this sale today is perhaps in his mind he might think it's complete. In the salesperson's mind, it should never be. The follow-up is the key. They need to make absolutely certain that they're satisfied with the product, goods, or services, and that's when you get your best prospects from that person. If it's a one-shot deal, they never see you again, you've always got to be prospecting for new clients. But the really successful ones know and really solicit that trust in the person they're dealing with by proving that they are dependable. I'm interested in the results, not just the fact that I get the order signed today.
Right. I cannot think of a harder job than doing door-to-door sales. So tell us about that. I mean, what happened? You knock on a door and, can I come in and sell you? So, I mean, I can't imagine something harder than that. How did that work, and how did you build a successful career doing that?
Well, it worked wonderfully well, Chris. Now, I got to tell you, in all honesty, after Mr. Merrill got through with me, I made a decision, namely that every day at precisely the same time, I would be knocking on a door. And so at that exact time, every single day, rain, shine, whether it's at 0-degree temperature, raining, or whether it was boiling hot, I was knocking on the door. I don't ever remember looking forward to knocking on the first door, or even the second. By the third one, is, I was kind of getting in the groove and so forth. But the bottom line is I did that every day for that entire year. And here's the interesting thing. The company issued the reports every week. Not one single week or not one single month during that entire year did I ever finish in the top 20. Not once. But at the end of the year, I was number 2 out of the 7,000 because I never shot a blank. Every week I had a sale, at least one sale. Now, one of the things that I think was probably the best thing I did was enlist the aid of my wife, and she would always ask me after each day, well, what do we do? How do we sell? And so forth. Because we made a little deal that if on Friday I had reached a certain objective, that night we would go out to dinner. So I don't need to tell you that she kept score on what we were selling.
She was praying for you to be able to sell.
Man, and encouraged me, honey, it's time for you to go now.
Shouldn't you be selling something?
Yeah.
So what's the process? You had to learn, and again, in one of the hardest situations, what's the process? I mean, it's the epitome of a cold call to show up on somebody's doorstep. Yeah. People out there who are worried about picking up the telephone, I can't imagine, that's as difficult as knocking on someone's door.
Oh, it's not.
What's the process there?
Well, the process simply is you just remember that in that particular company had been in business a long time. There had never been a fatality as a result of knocking on a door. So we learned right away that it was really a safe thing to do. Yeah. Number 2, we realized that most people, whether they're interested in or not, most people actually actually are pretty neat, nice people. And if we presented ourselves well, and one of the little things that I learned in knocking on doors, I would knock on the door or ring the bell, then I would back up about 10 steps from the door itself. So that if they did not have a window to look through, the housewife who opened that door would see that I was not about to run in, you know, and pounce on her. And so I would make my presentation about 10 feet from her.
So you were trying to make them comfortable. I mean, that's a principle of sales.
Oh, absolutely.
Make the person comfortable.
Absolutely. They got to be secure that I'm not going to, you know, I'm not going to be one of the bad guys.
That's true.
Now, I got to tell you, I knocked on doors for 10 days, and we had a canned sales presentation. We were on a service call to service the equipment that had been sold earlier. But I got to tell you, for 10 days, I never was able even to get inside of a home. I never will forget, I was on Idalia Drive over in Columbia, South Carolina, and it was a long street. And I said to myself, now, Seth, if you don't at least get in one of these homes on this street, you're going to throw in the towel. This is not for you. When I got to the next to last home, I'll never forget this, a Mrs. B.C. Dickert answered the door, you know, and I gave my little can spiel, you know, and she said, well, that sounds interesting to me, said, but why don't you come back this evening, and my sister next door, Mrs. J.O. Freeman, her husband will be home, and maybe both of us can look at it together. Well, man, that's the first word of encouragement I'd ever had in my knocking on the door career. I almost literally ran next door, and sure enough, I made the appointment to come back that evening. I got there, and she said that Mrs. Dickert had said she'd be over there with them. Well, when I got to her home, to the Freeman's home after I knocked on their door, that night, then I said, well, where's Ms. Dickert? And they said, well, she's going to come over, and she did just a moment later. Well, I made the presentation, and when I got through, Mr. Freeman said, well, I just believe I'll take that.
Now, when you made a presentation, did you cook with the cookware?
No, I didn't. At that point, I didn't. I just simply demonstrated, showed the cookware, and explained the benefits and so forth. I finished the presentation, and he bought, and it was a sale, I believe, for $64. Man alive, was I in hog heaven. I'd done made myself a sale. Now, Miss Dickert was sitting there, you know, and when I wrote the order, I was just so enthralled and so enthused and so motivated, you know, I thought the whole world was now at a standstill. And so I was ignoring Mrs. Dickert. So Mr. Freeman said, Mr. Ziglar, I believe Ms. Dickert's interested. I said, well, what about it, Ms. Dickert? She said, well, I didn't bring my checkbook with me. And with great diplomatic skill, I said, well, Chuck, you just live next door. Why don't you go over there and get it? She said, well, I think I will.
That was one of the first closes, right?
Absolutely, right there. And when I got home, I'm telling you, we lived in a little upstairs apartment. I had those two sales, you know, first thing in all of those days I'd been knocking on doors, and I didn't hit 2 steps on the way upstairs. And I'd bought a quart of ice cream in celebration, and so we had quite a little feast that night. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience, but it showed me that I could sell.
You know, you mentioned motivation, and motivation is so important in the sales industry because sales oftentimes is repetitive things. You're always meeting new people. There's lots of rejection. To get to the one person who says yes, you got to go through a lot of people who say no. How do you stay motivated as a salesperson?
Well, again, if you're married, that's where the mate comes in so wonderfully well, because they can assure you, you know, that, honey, they might have said no to you, but I'm going to say yes to you. You're still my hero. I love you, and I'm just so glad we have this opportunity, that kind of relationship. But what we also need to understand is that failure is an event. It's not a person.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, if you don't make a sale today, that doesn't mean you're a failure. It means you did not sell anything today. But tomorrow is a brand new day. We can start all over. And that's one of the most important things of all. Now, fortunately, I was born a pretty disciplined individual. I'm an optimist, as you might have heard me say on other occasions. You know, I'm the kind of guy that go after Moby Dick in a rowboat and take the tartar sauce with him. I mean, that's the way I'm structured. So I was optimistic that the next one would be better. And I think optimism is really a key part of our makeup if we're going to continue in sales. We accept the fact. The reality is we're not going to sell everybody we talk to, but the reality is it is a numbers approach. You make enough calls, you will make enough sales. Now, if we are studying all the way and learning and preparing for it, go into the right meetings, and I never will forget, I almost did not go to the most important sales meeting I would ever have missed. That's that morning I awakened. I'd been up there in Charlotte all day long in a meeting and didn't learn anything. 5 o'clock, the alarm clock goes off, and it was an alarm clock in those days. Now it's an opportunity clock. If I can hear it, that means I've got an opportunity to get up and go. If I can't hear it, that might mean I done got up and gone. Well, anyhow, went off. We were living in a little 3-room apartment above a grocery store. 5 o'clock, weather was horrible. When the clock went off, you know, I looked out and I said, no sane person would ever get in a little Crosley automobile without a heater in weather like this and drive all the way to Charlotte to go to another meeting. So I lay back down. As I lay down, the words of my mother came back to me. Son, if you work for a man, you work for him all the way. You're loyal to him in every way. And if your word is no good, you're no good. I had promised this company, which had taken me 2 months to get the job, that if they would give me the opportunity, I'd be at every sales meeting, I'd be at every training session. And in 2.5 years, despite my lack of success, I'd been at every sales meeting, at every training session, and I'd never even been late. The words of my mother came back. I rolled out of bed, went to the meeting. That's the one that changed my life.
How did it change your life?
It changed my life because that's the day that Mr. Merrill persuaded me that I could be the champion.
Okay. Comes full circle now.
Oh, man, it sure did. And so it made all the difference in the world.
Yeah. If you had to boil successful salespeople down to 4 or 5 basic principles, what would they be to become a successful salesperson?
Well, first of all, they've got to have an intense belief in what they're selling. Believe with all their heart that the customer is going to be the biggest beneficiary in it. Number 2, you have that belief because you are a user of the product if it's a practical thing to do. You don't have to buy a new locomotive engine to prove that you believe in the product, is what I'm saying. But if it's something that is in general use, you believe in it. If you're selling Fords and driving a Chevrolet, that, you know, is a contradiction.
Sometimes when people call me up on the phone to sell me something, I'll say, do you use it? And almost all the time they say, well, no. And I say, call me back when you use it. And they don't know what to say.
Oh, absolutely not. Well, I had a fervent belief in everything I ever sold, and I always sold the top of the line. I believed in selling the best if I wanted to be the best, and I had a fervent belief in it, and I think that's very important. Number 3, I listened to the people who were successful in selling that product. I would learn new things from different ones, new approaches, and that's you must be a constant student. A lot of people are afraid to try anything new because they are afraid that they will be embarrassed until they get good at it. Well, one of my favorite sayings is, you know, the most important thing you can do is to understand that anything worth doing is worth doing poorly.
What do you mean by that?
Until you can learn to do it well. My first few sales calls were pathetic, but I knew it was worth doing, so I kept after it, you know. My first few speeches were a disaster, but I believed that I could develop into that, so I kept at it until I could do it effectively. And all skills are exactly the same way. No running back that sets the records ever set a record the first time he picked up a football. Sure. And you can go right down the line with that. So if it's worth doing and you believe in it, go ahead and fail. And the more times you fail, the closer you get into success, because you should be learning on every simple thing that you do.
You know, recently the term close has gotten kind of a bad connotation to it. Nobody wants to be closed anymore, and we don't want to close our clients, and we want to have relationships and all that. And I don't think that the two are mutually exclusive. Can you talk to us about what it means to close a sale?
Well, let me emphasize a point. When you think about it in these terms, I always, when I'm doing a group sales presentation or training session, how many of you sell a pretty good product? All the hands. How many of you sell a really good product? The hands all go up. How many of you believe that your product solves a problem? Every hand goes up. How many of you believe that if you solve a problem that you deserve some compensation for solving that problem? How many of you believe that the more problems you solve, the more business you will develop as a result of it? And again, every hand goes up. Then how many of you have been selling at least a year? Most hands go up. How many of you still got every dime you've ever made as a salesman? No hands go up. Right. Then I say, how many of you have got customers that you sold 5 years ago who are still enjoying the benefits of what you sold all those years ago? A lot of hands go up. How many of you, with those customers, how many of you honestly feel now that the sales process is something that you do to somebody or something you do for somebody? That puts it in a different perspective. When you go and when you offer your wares, offer your product, what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to do something for you through this product that otherwise could not be done. So the only question you have to ask is, how soon do I want to start enjoying these benefits?
Well, and that comes back to what you were saying about if you believe in your product, if you really fervently believe in it, you're never going to close anybody because you're not doing it to them. You're not just trying to get the sale. You're really trying to help and come alongside them, right?
Absolutely. In many of my training calls where I had one of the new salespersons with me, I've seen many times the prospect would say, well, now you're not trying to sell me something, are you? Oh, no, no, no. Well, why are you there? You just come for a social visit? The reality is that you are there because you have an offer that is in their best interest. And if you do not feel sincerely that this is something that will benefit them more than it will be you, you've got no business being there in the first place. And for that reason, you need to carefully prepare. You need to become a constant student. Chris, to this day, when I'm getting ready for a speech, when I'm getting ready for anything that I'm going to be presenting, thoughts, ideas, or whatever, I carefully review, I carefully plan. Talks I've made 100 times, I still will spend 6 to 8 hours preparing for that one. Every salesperson should be preparing every time for his prospect that he's got in front of him. I can't begin to tell you the number of times I've had salespeople say to me, you know, when I go from one area to another, to make another call, I always pop in a CD or a cassette in my player so that I can get re-energized and re-motivated, because this next call is the most important one I'll make today. We need to make every call with the idea, this is the most important one. And many times it's the last call in the day that really does make the greatest difference in the success of that day. So the old saying, you know, you just keep on pleasantly persistent, but doing it in a loving, caring way. But when you always remember that you are there to help, not to take or extract something from them, but to bring them a product that will give them a better life, more leisure, save money, or whatever the major benefits are. And the good salesperson always leads off with his number one benefit and closes with his number two benefit. First thing you hear, you're likely to remember. The last thing you hear, you're likely to remember. And those are the things that get the results.
Excellent stuff. And we could spend all sorts of time talking about sales. In fact, you have all sorts of books and CDs and products teaching people the sales process. But thanks for being here today and sharing with us the stuff that you've shared with us today. Great stuff, lots of wisdom, and appreciate it very much.
Thank you. It's been a delight, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. That's all the time we have for today. I'd like for you, our audience, to remember that sales are vital to your personal growth, success, and true performance. We'll see you next time.